Like you got those birds in the background again, man.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
Or yours.
One of you guys got birds in the back. That's all I care about. Makes my day happier, brighter.
Yeah, maybe me. They've been kind of loud.
Yeah, where I'm at now, my new office here, there's a lot of trees around me and all kinds of bird activity.
Yeah, you can see that I'm in my cabin too, and not
Mhm.
all. Oh man, trees, birds, everything. It's wildlife galore. It's crazy.
I like the
I don't know. Maybe we change the name again to Hacking in a Cabin.
hacking the cabin.
Yeah.
I like the with the vertical wood to kind of.
I had to change it up. Couldn't have the
Yeah.
exact same wood as
Mhm.
you guys. You know, I had the horizontal wood. I just quickly just tore it all down and put up some vertical.
Smart.
Yeah, when I saw yours. Yeah.
Everybody, I see folks are hopping on. We'll get rolling here in just a few minutes. Give everybody another minute or two to pop in here.
Heck yeah.
So you guys want to talk sandwiches?
I mean, I do
You like sandwiches?
I like
Talk
me a
about
sandwich.
sandwich.
Let's do it. What's your best sandwich? Best sandwich ever. What's on it?
Go ahead,
I
Eric.
mean, oh, okay. Best sandwich ever. It's got cheese. It's got some sausage, some bacon, some egg, and preferably the bread is a tortilla and maybe some potatoes in there. And that's a breakfast burrito. That's probably your best sandwich you're ever gonna get.
I do. Let's see where you took it there. What kind of cheese though? That's important. And what kind of sausage are we talking too? I mean, there's a lot of different cheeses and sausages out there, man.
Look, okay. First of all, pepper jack is the cheese we're going to use in this situation, whether it be a sandwich or it be a burrito. It's just what we're going to use. And sausage, all of them, any kind. It's going to be a different type. It's still going to be good. You know what I mean? Maybe not like an Italian sausage. I don't know about that. It'll probably still be good. Let's be honest. It'd be
good.
Give it like a chorizo or like just a standard like Southern breakfast sausage kind of.
Oh, chorizo works. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Breakfast sausage, even just like, I don't know, cut up a brat or something and put it in there. It's going to be good. It's going to work.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm a fan of the sage sausage, but the like smoked smokehouse sausage, been digging that lately. It's good stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm a simple man on sandwiches, but so where I've had to cut the wheat out, it's a little different ball game because the bread's not quite the same when you're doing the gluten-free bread. But I really like just bacon, a bacon sandwich, maybe a little mayonnaise on there. I'm good to go. I'll eat that all day long.
Mm-hmm.
You ever do the lettuce and tomato, make BLT?
I'm a simple man. You give me bacon.
I don't need no salad with his bacon.
So you're not a rabbit, I take it. All right.
Right.
Mine, and somebody I see already commented this, and I got to second this, but my favorite sandwich, the best sandwich for me is just white bread, old fashioned cheap white bread with smoked brisket on it. And then I like putting some white cheddar cheese and pickled jalapenos, and put a little bit of that pickled jalapeno juice on it too, soak into the meat and the bread. And oh man, that's my favorite.
I'll tell you, I joked about a breakfast sandwich or burrito. I really do love sandwiches. For me, it changes all the time, right? It's about what kind of spread or something you put, like an aioli, or I had talked, we were joking around it before, and I was like, anything with an olive tapenade or something, right? Like honestly, that's, you put a spread of some kind that's got like a complex flavor to it. No matter what else is on there, you can make that sandwich good.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
I do want to answer a question.
Yeah,
really,
please answer that.
Well, there's one. Is a hot dog a sandwich? That's the one I'm going to answer. The answer is no. Everyone knows that that's a taco.
Thank you. Perfect.
Good enough. We'll leave it.
Just,
so I told Alex we don't want to start a war here.
Yeah.
Sorry for making you all hungry. We did assume this was past lunchtime for most of you all, but maybe not.
It's actually lunchtime for me, and I haven't eaten, so it actually sucks, but it's fine.
Yeah. do see a lot of interaction in the chat. We do try to pay attention to that. We may not see everything, but we would encourage you guys to keep stuff coming like that. We appreciate it, enjoy it. If you have questions as we go along here, feel free to fire those in and we'll do our best to answer. Got a lot of stuff to cover today, so we'll probably just dig right in. Let you know too to stick around. We're adding a new thing near the end of the Hackle Box today, and it's going to be the fishing report. Pinky's going to be giving us a good fishing report, so know what they're biting out there. I think that's going to be good. And we got some other fun stuff we're planning for future episodes as well. So keep tuning in, giving us your feedback and thoughts on how you'd like to see this become better for you. We do listen to those things. So you guys ready to dig in here?
Always.
Apple all over the place. I think we seen an opportunity to talk about these Apple vulnerabilities, and like to jump on that opportunity because I don't think many of us on the call are Apple fans. I know a lot of you probably are, and that's okay. But I think this is good news because it is shedding a light on a lot of things that we've talked about and known before. Apple is vulnerable. I think Eric, you hit the nail on the head when we were chatting before this. The reason being before we didn't see so many exploits or targets against Apple devices is market wasn't big enough. So attackers are targeting more profitable victims. We're starting to see that shift a little bit this year. So let's dig in on, I guess, the two iOS O days. I think that's the first one to talk about. Both those vulnerabilities were in WebKit. WebKit is primarily the browser engine, right? But that browser engine also works in conjunction with Safari, Mail. I think you'd mentioned, Eric, even messaging, all kinds of other applications embedded into the Mac. And essentially this O day, both of these vulnerabilities, both of these 0 days, would allow an attacker to lead to arbitrary code execution. I've seen that Apple does believe these were exploited in the wild before they were patched. They have been patched at this point. But yeah, make sure if you are using those Apple devices, that you are aware those vulnerabilities and risks are still present to you, and make sure you're updating your software. I think, Eric, you had some cool stats too, just based on the numbers around the O days, how many of those have related to Apple so far, and lots of good stuff there if you want to share.
Yeah, it's not so much that it's a cool stat. I mean, we're looking at, the kind of data that was linked in the articles and stuff, and it's, looking at O days that have been released for some of the major companies, like Microsoft, Adobe, Google, Apple, etc. And I just thought it was interesting is they're talking about it being, 7 O days for Apple affecting, kind of pretty much all their devices, right? iOS and WebKit this year alone, right? Just 7 already so far this year. Which you compare it to, it's like Microsoft, thanks to Exchange server ones, the 4 different ones that have come out this year, is slightly higher with 8, and then everyone else is lower, So Apple's actually, definitely up there so far this year. And I just thought it was interesting, like talking about it in general, there's this kind of, obviously there's always that rhetoric that, like apples don't get viruses, or the one I always loved in the commercials was apples are not vulnerable to PC viruses, like PC being anything that's not an Apple. Like, well,
right. Yeah.
Okay. Like it's always this kind of marketing scheme, kind of whatever. It's always interesting. Everybody kind of always knows, yeah, they're vulnerable. They can be vulnerable. There's not as many vulnerabilities. Generally, it's because market share just didn't kind of justify it, and things like that. But as time goes on, there's going to be more of them. I did find it was interesting stats, at least, that there's 7 out of 22 so far this year where Apple related.
Yeah, and that does bring up another good point. I know we've been thinking about here is that the pace at which we're seeing O days this year is increasing. I know you had mentioned some stats you've seen last year. It was 25 total. Is that right?
Yeah, in the same document they've got. Yeah, so this year so far, according to this, is 22. Last year total was 25. The year before that total was 20, right? And so if that continues at that rate, this year's going to be an interesting year. But yeah, we'll see.
Definitely.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So continuing on Apple too. On top of that, there's an interesting article we're going to share with you guys about essentially how AirDrop leaks PII, and there's really nothing you can do about it. From my understanding in this right now, everybody knows AirDrop, utilizes Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to establish direct connections with nearby devices. It's supposed to do some sort of authentication to see if you're in their address book, and then you can link. I think there are multiple settings within AirDrop too, so you can set it so only your contacts can connect. You can open it so anyone can connect, which is really bad. Don't do that, or you can just turn it off, right? And of those three, so we're learning, right? And we have learned that AirDrop is inadvertently linking email addresses and phone numbers. From what I see based on this attack, right, it seems pretty trivial. That authentication mechanism essentially broadcasts a hash of the user's phone number or the email address, right? And so to attack that, it's essentially brute forcing. We know phone numbers have low entropy. It would be easy to brute force those hashes and force connections with other available AirDrop devices. What is most interesting to me about this is that the researcher who discovered this presented this to Apple 2 years ago, 2019. And Apple has not updated, haven't responded, really haven't commented on that. And they've continued to put out a lot of cool commercials talking about how secure they are. But on the flip side, they're not responding to what researchers are giving to them. Yeah, I thought that one was pretty interesting as well.
It's interesting in the sense that this is a common tactic in handshaking devices, right? To present hash data to verify your identity. We see this in all of Microsoft Windows, domain authentications and stuff like that, right? Use our credential hashes to hash something else or whatever to kind of verify who you are, right? This is a common type of thing, at least in handshakes. But yeah, when you're looking at things that are low entropy, such as a phone number, the email address, I don't think is as obviously it's not as low entropy. It's not going to be as easy to crack. That would be actually pretty difficult to some extent, right? Knowing popular things though, like Gmail, Apple, whatever different domains for the email will help, but still it's gonna be a little bit more difficult. But phone numbers are extremely easy to crack immediately, right? So
yeah, especially considering with these attacks, you have to be close to someone, right? And we're going to know geographically where we are, what are the typical area codes in use, what are those number blocks in use, and so on. So it narrows that data set significantly if you're focusing on a geographic location.
Right. I think one of the things too that was interesting about the attack specifically is that, like you were talking about the settings, you have the option of saying, well, I want to communicate with just people on my contact list, or anybody can send stuff. But the thing is that when you go to actually send something out to people, it's going to broadcast, hey, I'm looking to send something, right? And so it'll go to anyone in general.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what your setting is. If your setting is your address book or everyone, it's still going to do it no matter what. And what it was saying is to even just to send these packets out, they get sent out, these broadcasts get sent out when you just open the share menu. It's not like that you're necessarily looking to AirDrop it. When you open the share menu, the AirDrop's going to go detect who's
it's going to broadcast at that point.
So it broadcasts at that point. So anytime anyone in your vicinity hits share, and then maybe they share it to Twitter or something, it doesn't matter. When they hit share, it's sending out that broadcast and people can pull that information.
Right. So what do we tell folks to do here, guys?
Turn off AirDrop.
Yeah.
Turn off AirDrop.
Yeah, I guess we were talking about before the call. It just seems like a bad idea in general, right? It's not. Kill it.
Yeah. How hard is it to share something through other mechanisms that are secure? I see somebody mentioned AirTag too. I did see, it looks like there are some vulnerabilities already out there related to AirTag. I'm not as familiar with those yet. Something to do with the loss mode. So I don't know a lot about that. I don't know if you guys have studied that yet or not.
I haven't, no.
Yeah. Moral of the story is, protect your Apple devices the same way you would anything else. Everything's vulnerable. Moving on. So Passwordstate, which is credential manager, was victim of a supply chain attack, was backdoored and essentially leaked or stole, however you want to look at it, creds for an estimated 29,000 organizations. I don't know if any of our listeners are users of Passwordstate. If you are, hopefully you've heard about this by now. And you're going through that remediation process, resetting all those creds and securing those creds that were likely leaked in this scenario. But yeah, I thought this was interesting again because it was another supply chain attack, right? We all remember SolarWinds, it was a big deal. This one I thought was also interesting too because Passwordstate is targeted toward corporate customers, right? Their marketing, they target this product to corporate customers to be able to use this password manager to store access for their firewalls, VPNs, devices, applications within the business. From what I understand at this point, with this attack as well, this was very similar to SolarWinds. Attackers were able to essentially embed a malicious update into the application so that when users installed that update, it would then deploy the payload. From my understanding too, that payload did still contain a legitimate copy of the password manager, Passwordstate, but also contained a malicious DLL named Loader. That malicious DLL named Loader was a loader. So it was download cradle. It would hit an external source, download a secondary payload. That secondary payload never touches disks. A lot of techniques we see throughout attacks. It would run in memory, and then essentially they would execute their final payload, which is extracting system information as well as harvesting the password state data. Yeah, so thoughts on that, guys?
Go ahead, Pink.
Yeah, I was gonna say just it's unfortunate, right? We're always pushing password managers and things like that for a lot of really good reasons, and again, like we've talked about before, we're always pushing updates, right? Do your updates, but these attacks like this are a little scary from that. So I kind of in my notes I wonder where they got this idea. But yeah, it is scary. And then too, we're seeing a lot more, seems like memory resident issue, malwares and whatever. I mean, I know it's been around a long time, but it seems like it's pretty much everything now that we're looking at. So I don't know if Eric had something to add there.
I was just going to make a small correction to what Oscar had said. It wasn't necessarily a malicious DLL. It was actually like a class written into a DLL that is used by the application. So
okay.
They just buried the code into like a class added to that DLL. So yeah, that's interesting too, right? It's going to make it's probably just it was chosen that way, I'm assuming, to make it so that it was more difficult to notice the change, right? You're going to put code into something that is used, but maybe it's more of a supported library that you're not necessarily updating code to, or maybe it's not even something that they get to update code to. It might have been a thing that they're just using on the side. I don't know exactly the details of it, the app secret splitter that was in it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think a big thing here is like, what's the verdict on password managers? And this is something like, we all have to think about, right? Password managers are great in the fact that they allow us to create complex passwords, things that we don't have to remember, right? Store safely, hopefully store those. But the downside of this is always, if your password manager is compromised, then all your passwords are compromised. It's not just one. So you got a single point that can compromise all of your other applications, connections, and so on. So it is a risk that we all have to be aware of, right? But at the same time, I think the reward does still outweigh the risk in this situation.
Yeah, and I mean, I know at least for your cloud-based ones, your LastPass and that kind of thing, right? You can enable MFA and do some different things to kind of help in case you lost your password or someone gained access to your master password or whatever. The local ones, that's a little bit of a different ball game. I know there's a bunch of those out there. I've used a bunch over the years, and I always kind of liked the local ones more because I feel like I've got a little more control over where they're at. It's not out in the cloud somewhere. But this shows that even those aren't safe. So. I mean, in that it's still risk reward, though. I still say use password managers. That's kind of my I think it greatly outweighs the risk.
There's always a downside to everything, right? But I think, as it was recently phrased in another thing I was reading recently, was that it's a net gain still to use them, right? At the end of the day. And yeah, there's a lot of things to consider. If you're using a password manager too, like as an attacker, one of the things I look at is that, are you using plugins to help it make it easier? Are you using a Chrome plugin to fill in your passwords? Can I dump the memory from Chrome and then extract passwords out of that because they're decrypted and sitting in there in a module in there? Things like that. So there's always downsides, but we that's security, right? It's measuring risk, determining what the financial damage is, what the cost is to fix it, what overall net gains, right?
Yep.
On the local one too, just from that perspective, as an attacker, when I see people using local ones, I think, hey, I could take this and crack it offline. Nice.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I can't just brute force your LastPass account or whatever. But if you have a KeyPass database locally, I can grab that, I can extract the hash out of it, and I can crack it offline. So
yeah, I think I recall there was an exploit on like a downgraded or an older version of, I can't remember which browser specific it was, for LastPass, right? Where the browser module for Firefox specific version, right? If we were pen testing per se, and we had access to someone's desktop that was using that module, we could force a log off and essentially force them to relog in and harvest those creds at that same time. So everything does have a weakness, but it still goes back to, I think, like what Pinky was saying there too. The expectation is you have MFA everywhere you can. So even if you get those creds, you're going to be notified if someone does try to use those. You go reset those right away, and hopefully the attacker doesn't access your vault.
Yep. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is having that MFA. And but knowing that, even if with memory states and all that other stuff, there's other ways to get into things. The conversation we're having with someone recently about the net gain was talking about like the built-in ones in browsers and stuff these days. Like, well, even if it's a built-in one, that's more secure, right? It's like, yes, it is a net gain, but at the end of the day, it's easy for me to steal them potentially too if I'm local on that machine and I get to it. So
yeah, we just think of like the way the brain works, right? If we don't have this manager to help us generate these passwords and remember these passwords, we're going to be more prone to creating human rememberable passwords, which equate to guessable passwords in most cases.
Right.
Well, more easily guessed passwords, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, you could always say,
so
my password now, spring 2021. That's a real nice long one.
Yeah, meeting complexity requirements doesn't equal a secure password. I think we can all attest to that. Yeah. So if anyone on the call today, your password is spring 2021, with or without a bang, I'd go change that.
I'm waiting for attendees to start dropping. See if anybody's gonna go reset those.
All right, let's keep on keeping on here with another O day. Pulse VPN Zero day. I'm sure you guys heard about that one. So again, public service announcement here for any of our users who may be using Pulse VPN. Sorry, I seen someone still using Winter 2020. You guys need to change the password age policy so you'll get a spring quicker and we can have more success. Anyway, so the PSA for any of our users who are using Pulse, I hope you've already discovered this. I hope you've patched. They have put out a patch, but essentially there was a 0 day that was affecting the SMA 100 series. From my understanding at this point, that was the only product line used by Pulse that was vulnerable to this. CVE related, and we'll send you guys links like we always do for these things, so you can read a little bit more. CVE was 2021-20016. It was essentially a SQL injection vulnerability. So you could, oh shoot, I skipped to the wrong CVE. I'll pause if you guys have that CVE while I pull that back up. Yeah, it's 2021-22893. Anyway, you were allowed to essentially bypass authentication, right, and gain access to the server. At that point, I think attackers were dropping shells, from what I understand, to establish persistence. Once they had persistence established, at that point, they're going to go through the standard kill chain. Is there any more you guys want to shed on that particular O day?
I mean, just the same thing. I did want to just point out the shell thing there, right? Because, we see a lot of that. We get people, hey, we patched it, we're safe. Well, did you look for the shells? Were you vulnerable for long enough for somebody to establish that persistence? So
yeah, that's a common theme, like we saw with Hafnium, right? As a lot of folks didn't understand. A, if you patch, you're not still okay. B, if you had the shell, how to clean that up. But another thing too is we learned a lot of folks didn't know how to detect if the shell had been accessed. That's important as well, right? So we've seen a lot of these cases. Just because you had the shell doesn't mean they actually used the shell, especially when folks are trying to blanket a large canvas as quickly as they can to deploy shells for persistence so they can come back later. So it's important to be able to analyze those things, determine if those shells were accessed, and then if the shells were accessed, and that's when we really have a lot of concern, right? We start having to dig into your environment to see if they did progress the attack to the next stages.
Yeah, and always just assuming that when you have an attacker, once they get in, their entire purpose is how do I get back in, right? Like how do I get persistence? How do I get back in the network? What kind of data can I exfiltrate to get back in over a normal communication line or something like that, like a VPN or something, whatever it might be, you know. In this case too, I know that these vulnerabilities allowed in some situations like cached data, right, to be extracted. So credentials for those devices. So even if they're patched, well, do we know the password now to get into that device? You know, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
One other thing on that too, just as I was reading the article, one thing that kind of stood out to me was when they were investigating this too, they saw that there were also vulnerabilities from 2019 and 2020 that were still being exploited, right? So as they were looking at this new one, they saw, well, I mean, you had these others that were still out there that people were abusing and not patched for. So definitely want to take a look at that. You know, even if you're not using, someone in the chat mentioned that they're not using the features there, but may want to just get up to date on patches anyway, in case you're behind enough to be getting those older exploits as well.
Yeah, I mean, and this patch handled three criticals right this last time alone. So there's quite a bit going on there, and I could discuss those types of vulnerabilities all day. They're interesting, especially like the use after free ones, but we would not have enough time to get into it. But yeah.
Yeah, I do have to correct myself here too. I mixed up those KBs and CVE numbers. The devices on this was the PCS 9. It looks like PCS 9.1 revisions and 9.0 revisions were broadly impacted by this.
Yeah.
And this one too, I think was interesting. Probably seen a lot in the news because of U.S. agencies, right? We know that there were attacks on, at this point, 5 federal civilian agencies. But what I've learned too is it sounds like there were 24 agencies that actually were utilizing Pulse VPN technology. At this point, I think 5 have been disclosed as breached. Not sure if those others were impacted or not, and how far the extent of that goes.
It was a little general, a little vague. Even the 5 that were, it was like a 5 have seen signs of there was a potential thing, right? It's like, but we're looking to see what actually happened, if something actually happened. So they didn't have a lot of data yet. It looked like the people were working on it, but it does look like 5, up to 5 potentially had something going on.
Yep. Yeah, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about those attacks on the government later, as we see like some government retaliation stuff happening right now. Another quick hit, like the government's kind of going to be a recurring theme as we talk about some of these things today, because we do see they are starting to respond to things. We also know there were reports, this is in our quick hit, we're probably not going to get to that and cover in depth today, but that we learned that government agencies were essentially exploiting vulnerable Hafnium systems to fix those systems, which is interesting because, again, I think last week we talked about, last month, another similar government intervention. And in this case, I wondered, like, hey, are they patching the boxes and are they checking for web shells? Are they cleaning those shells up? What exactly are they doing? I do understand that they were notifying customers, who were impacted. So continuing on, I think the other O-Day that was in the news over the last month was the Sonicwall Serial Day. And that one was interesting too, because it appears as though attackers were targeting those in conjunction with a specific variant of ransomware, FiveHands, that was later deployed, gaining access to your network through the Sonicwall, then going through a typical attack chain with the ultimate goal being of deploying the FiveHands ransomware. We'll send you guys out the list of all those affected devices as well afterwards. So again, recurring theme here. If you're using Sonicwall VPN or using Sonicwall firewalls, check to make sure your devices aren't in this list. Make sure you update those ASAP.
That was the one that you accidentally said earlier, the SMA 100 series, right?
That's right. That's the SMA 100s. And that patch was actually released in February. And so again, it goes back to like, what we've seen in a lot of Hafnium cases, right? So the only people that we're aware of with when Hafnium happened that actually got significantly impacted through a ransom or they had C2s on the network or something like that were the folks who acted late, right? So if you acted quick in those situations, you got your patch out. In most cases, you're going to be okay. Would say, obviously, if you knew you were vulnerable for any period of time, do a quick check on those systems, just like we talked about before. Make sure there were no persistence mechanisms deployed on the devices. Also, just do a quick health check. You know, it's something everyone should be doing on your VPN anyway. Make sure your users are connecting from locations that you expect them to connect from. Make sure you're not seeing lots of variations in time or abnormal times where users are expecting that you wouldn't connect that. Pattern and normalize your connection in your environment, your VPN, and hunt for anomalies to see if there is any continued abuse there. I think that one was interesting too. Just because they were in the beginning, it seemed like it was probably one APT, right? And I think Pinky, you found some research where FireEye was creating that to UNC 2447, Sumbrat, and they seemed to be the primary adversarial group that was targeting those devices.
Yeah, and they had a few different ransomware variants in there. Look like in that they were kind of attributing at least to them. I don't know if they were necessarily using it in this attack. I will say the FiveHands one you mentioned earlier, though, and Eric may know if this is more of a more popular tactic than I'm used to seeing, but I thought it was kind of neat that this one was using the Windows Restart Manager to close open files so that they could kind of get around that locked file. You know, we see that a lot of times in ransomware attacks where files were locked and they couldn't be encrypted. This was defeating that, which, you know, I mean, from a programming standpoint, it's pretty cool, but not for people getting hit with it, right? So,
yeah.
I haven't heard a lot of stuff about it being widely used in attack scenarios. I've definitely used it on my own machine occasionally when things were working weird and I needed to free things up, but otherwise, no.
Gotcha.
Yeah, another key point too about the FiveHands, right, is they're following the double extortion model, which is something we'll dig into a little bit more when we talk about the pipeline stuff here shortly. But that seems to be the way of the world in ransom right now. Seeing that more and more of the time, and we'll dig into what that means a little bit more. But yeah, cool. You guys want to talk about the pipeline? I'm sure everybody here probably wants to talk about that, hear about that too.
No, let's just skip that.
It's not that big a deal, right? I mean, just gloss over that one today.
We could talk sandwiches some more.
I mean, I'm down.
So yeah, I'm sure everybody's heard about this. If you live in my neck of the woods or Pinky's neck of the woods, you've probably seen folks trying to hoard gas, which blew my mind. Actually, I heard some funny stories about people hoarding gas. One report of a guy who was in a gas station and he had 6 oil drum trash bags, you know, the big, thick, like 6 mil black plastic bags that he had lined them inside of each other and put it in the trunk of his car and filled it with gas and tied it off. I really want to know how far he got before that gasoline ate through those bags and maybe caught his car on fire. Also seen another story. I don't know the validity of this, where somebody had, you know, same thing, hoarded up 6 giant cans of gas in the back of their SUV, lit a cigarette and exploded their SUV. So don't hoard gas.
I was just thinking about that trash bag thing, man. I don't even know how he got it in there before. I mean, not that I've ever done anything.
Well, that's why he put 6 together, you know.
Even still, man, if you ever, you know, put a a styrofoam plate in gasoline, not that I've done that, it gets pretty quick. It eats it fast. So.
Yeah, it does. But so yeah, as we know, the ransomware attack, it was dark side ransomware. We'll talk a little more about that group as we continue. It essentially shut down 5,550 miles of pipe, which is huge. It had a significant impact on the entire eastern seaboard. They are back online now. They did announce they expect there could possibly be some service interruptions as they continue here. I can say in Paris, Kentucky, I've seen gas trucks on the road today, so that's a good sign. So just let's dig into the attack, right? Dark side's the ransomware, and we've learned a lot about them and a whole lot more today, right? They were, I was going to say they are, but they were ransomware as a service. Some people are even calling them ransomware as a corporation. I could say from everything I've learned about them, it seems to be one of the most professionally ran ransomware service networks that's out there at this point. They had a help desk. They had a phone line. You could even call in for support, right? Really strong support network. And again, this is another interesting point, is they had an ethical code. We did talk about the ethical code of ransom attackers a few months ago in the interview with an attacker. But this is always interesting for me. And their mission statement, they specifically noted they will not attack medical, funeral, which I thought was an interesting point, education, nonprofit, or government. They specifically noted that they only attack companies that are able to pay the requested amount. The idea is not to kill the business. A lot of what I learned about them too and studying here is it seemed like they were going after NASDAQ companies, right? They were looking at companies that had public financial profiles, had known earnings. And so essentially trying to secure that they were going to get a payment back when they executed this attack.
And not only that, but they were offering to sell the data early so you could short those businesses if you wanted to make some money that way. So
yeah, seen that as well. It's crazy. Yeah, and so what if happens if you don't pay with them? And it was like we mentioned, they extort all your data, and so they're going to release your data. They're going to contact news outlets, and typically if they're going after NASDAQ companies, the media is going to want to know about these breaches for sure. It's going to be a hot ticket. But the other thing I thought was super interesting here is that they had their own DDoS infrastructure. And so if you did refuse to pay and you were going to restore on your own, well, they brought on the pain again and would essentially launch DDoS attack against your infrastructure.
Yeah. This one is interesting in general too. I think it's interesting that, they have this code of conduct, they have all this stuff. Some of this came out after they made big news with the pipeline. Mm-hmm. They started coming out and being like, whoa, we're gonna be more careful. Right. We're gonna make sure we don't have these effects. I think the entire reason for their code of conduct was, who am I to say for sure, but I think it was a little less moral, a little bit more like, how can we fly under the radar a little bit easier and not get our stuff shut down, right? And then when this happened, they came out and said, well, we're going to be more careful about this, and this is not something we intentionally did, and we're not associated with a nation state, and all this, trying to really save face, which is an interesting time to be alive, mm-hmm. right? Where you've got right. a ransomware service provider who's trying to, put out fires in social media and world dilemma, like relationships. They're really trying to be like, hold on, we're not that bad. Leave us alone. Yeah. Save face, and then as of today is noticing that didn't work anyway.
Yep.
So,
I will note too, if you look at their kind of what they say they want to attack, oil pipelines are nowhere in that statement, right? So
right. Yeah, for sure.
They're changing anything that would have prevented this.
Yeah. Right. Well, they are because they're shutting down, but
yeah. But they did have that kind of statement that was in between, right? Mm-hmm. That was along the lines of, we're not trying to make big influence overall on a government. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that was the whoops. We didn't want to have this much social impact. We wanted to fly under the radar. I think is what they were kind of saying, and if unfortunate for them, they didn't do that. So,
yeah. It was interesting too in some of the reports. After you do pay, obviously they give you that decryptor, which is typical. They give you the link to your data. They don't give you that back. They say, here's where your data is stored. Give you access. You can destruct that at that point, which, as we all know, is no guarantee that's the only copy of that data. And then they give you a guarantee they're not going to attack you again. But this is the best part. They actually give you a penetration test report. They give you a report of how they got in, how they staged their attack, how long they were there, what they did. Look at those nice guys, Sure. Yeah. It's probably the most expensive penetration test you're ever going to buy, but at least you get a penetration test report.
If we've got any of our own salespeople on the call right now, I just want to say, hey, we're cheaper than 30 million.
Yeah. Significantly.
But yeah, it does say something though. Still, again, about this whole it's interesting, right? Like, hey, we'll also give you the pen test report. I don't know. It's an interesting scenario. It's it's an interesting time to live. You know what I mean? Like that we have again this type of thing where people are like, you know, we'll give all. We want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth or something, right?
Yeah. It's like they want you to feel good about just getting robbed. Like, hey, we just robbed you, but you know what? We're not that bad. Here's how you can fix this so nobody does it to you again. See, we're very good guys.
Yeah.
I saw reports that they only, only is a very relative term here, but only paid $5 million to stop this one.
Yeah.
But because I would have expected a much bigger payday on that level of impact, and I think it's kind of like Eric was saying, right? Let's lessen the impact here. Maybe just give us the $5 million, we'll go away. But I would have easily expected this to be the 30 that you mentioned there. Honestly, just from things we've seen in the past.
Well, there was another one in one of the articles that was actually the one where because they did on their website, on DarkSide's website, they didn't say that you'd get a pen test report. At least nothing I saw. They didn't say things necessarily about the we will guarantee not to do this again, for that matter. But those were some of the promises that were, I guess, said in kind of some of the negotiations, and they had like some of the back and forth chat that was going on with the negotiation for one of them, and that number was 30 mil, and that's what I was going off of. But yeah, it was nonetheless. They're like, well, we'll give you a pen test report at the end, so there's that.
We should start asking for that in the attacks we're working. Just, hey, if we happen to make contact with the attackers for some reason, can you guys give us a pen test report? Let us know how you got it.
They're not going to give us the report though, because we always tell folks not to pay, and we get them back online without paying if they've got backups, and we get those guys out of there. So
we do our own report. We find the issue. Yep.
Yeah. So another interesting fact about DarkSide is that it is believed that some of the folks that were behind DarkSide were also some of the folks that were behind Are Evil and Soda no Kibi, which we really got our fill of Soda no Kibi over the last couple quarters, really heavy at the end of last year. And Are Evil was another one that I don't know. I think we've talked about it on here. I'm not sure if we did, but I know I wrote a blog post about it. It's like what goes when everything goes wrong in instant response. Check that out if you haven't. But Are Evil is specifically interesting because they are on that OFAC ban list, right? And so we've seen similar operations with them, or Are Evil, Soda Kenobi, they're kind of dropping right now. And so those guys know they're on that OFAC ban list. So that's going to prevent them from getting payment from any entity within the United States, essentially. So at that point, they're burned, right? So they can no longer distribute that ransom variant and actually expect to get funds back again. So they shift. And the shift, is right now, we believe some of those folks were involved in DarkSide. And then as of today, early this morning, we've seen that DarkSide announced they're shutting down operations. In conjunction with that as well, it appears as though that the United States has been able to seize some of their infrastructure. At this time, I'm not sure. I've seen different reports on what they actually seized, right? Some reports have said they did seize their Bitcoin stash, which is interesting. Their DDoS infrastructure, some of the other infrastructure pieces, shut down their shaming or their extortion website as well. I think that's no longer available. I did see some folks saying that the Bitcoin or their crypto payment portal was still active. I'm not sure if that's valid or not, and it could be possible too that the government has allowed that portal to stay active, as people who are still impacted by this encryptor may have an opportunity to get those decryption keys to recover their environment. I do know that in the shutdown release, DarkSide did also announce that they were giving all their affiliates the decryptors, right? And it was on them to handle negotiations, but the entity would no longer be supporting those negotiations. What do you guys think that means? I mean, do you think that there's a chance people who are in the middle of this, when they get shut down, they can recover, get those decryption keys? Or do you think that good chance we're going to probably, I mean, there has to be stuff lost in the shuffle here. I know they look like a pretty well-ran ransomware as a service organization, but can we really trust they're getting those decryptor keys to people that are going to continue negotiations? Or are we going to see other folks disappear just because they're afraid at this point?
I think these guys are going to give the keys to their affiliates. I don't think their affiliates are going to be as giving. This may be the last shot for some of those guys, is that they want to get their payout, that kind of thing, before they have to move on to something else. So I actually don't think they're going to give those keys up easily. If you want to do the right thing here, it's those guys should have found a way to publish those keys or something. But you kind of mess up your affiliates as well then, and that's a whole other ball, because these guys are just going to roll to another ransomware as a service.
Sure.
You know, I mean, they're just going to keep going but under a different name. So you don't want to lose face amongst your peers there. So.
Yeah. I don't know as far as the affiliates, right? I don't know what their incentive is to do really anything. I mean, try to get money if they can, but otherwise, beyond that, I don't know that they have any kind of incentive to give it out or just be like, whoops, that sucked, and move on.
Yeah, and disappear.
Yep.
Yeah,
I thought it was interesting too. Was just that
sorry, go ahead.
they had just opened up. I mean, not obviously they shut down now. I wasn't even going to talk about it too much, but now that they're kind of shut down, it was an interesting thing that they were advertising to bring in more affiliates, both of penetration testers and of people with breach networks, basically, right? And so that was an interesting, like you have a ransomware as a service company who's hiring pen testers, basically.
Yeah.
Got to get those sweet reports, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what that interview process is like if you do have to prove you're good at providing a written report. Maybe you're the leadest hacker around, bro, but if you can't write solid reports in English, then we can't hire you.
Specifically, the requirements for it that they were like advertising for was they were looking for people who basically they're just a middleman, right? That are handling all this stuff. So they're looking for people, one, who have breach networks, right? That would provide, hey, we got in, we hacked in, we're in, we have a foothold. They should provide that. And then they wanted pen testers to take those footholds and escalate them, right? Get to domain admin, spread through, get a bigger foothold, and do a typical internal red team, basically, right? And so, yeah.
I do see a note in the comments here. I noted this way do tabletop exercises to identify these scenarios. Completely agree with that. A lot of people don't understand the importance and the value of those exercises, but it's all about, like, I love this statement. I stole it from Harmon, and I think he stole it from somewhere else. But the worst time to test your incident response plan is the middle of an incident, right? And so giving us the opportunity, or giving yourselves and your teams the opportunity to go through the scenario before an incident occurs, you're going to learn a wealth about where your gaps are today, where your shortcomings are, and develop a good plan to fix those things so you are able to recover in these situations. You don't have to negotiate. I think that's critically important. Glad to see that comment. So
yeah, well, the comments kind of talking about the comment above too, where it's saying some of the reports saying that it was the IT infrastructure that got hit, but the OT was shut down just as a precaution, right? With the pipeline, that they just didn't, like, we know we got hit here, let's shut things down just a precaution. And then they're kind of saying, well, yeah, but this is why you do tabletops, right? To determine how you're going to handle, how you're going to segment these things, how you're going to shut this stuff down. And you guys talk about that a lot more than I can.
For sure.
Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, being able to, exactly like you said, Eric, segment things off. We know this area is hit, this subdomain, whatever the infrastructure looks like, we can cut them off and, stop the spread kind of thing. Where can we do that with minimal business impact and that kind of thing? And a lot of times when we're doing tabletop exercises, that's really the benefit that comes out of is people go, oh no, if this one thing gets hit, we are in so much trouble because we can't shut it off anywhere. It's going to just have to keep spreading. So yeah, it's a really good point.
Yep. So I do want to bring up another point. I'm sorry, Eric, go ahead.
I was just going to joke and say, all I know is that regardless of any kind of issues in your area, Kentucky gas is still almost $1 cheaper than it is here in Nevada. So
yeah.
It hasn't crest $3 yet. I actually filled up yesterday, not because I was hoarding, but because my gas light came on, and I was pleased to see it was still below $3.
Hey, when I fill up my tank, we don't travel, we don't go anywhere, so it's practically hoarding because it lasts like 2 months.
That turns to lacquer eventually, so we got to drive it, prevent that from happening.
Hey, a tank every 2 months is fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine. A lot of folks don't know. It's an interesting fact, totally not related to the Hackle Box, but gas will turn to lacquer. Look it up. So anyway, I want to go back to the beginning on US pipeline stuff and just make one more point that we talk about a lot. I know on here we always say, cover the basics, right? And typically most of the incidents that we work, it's not from some elite hack. It's not from an overly complex situation. The O days have changed that a little bit. We've seen that rash of O days this year already. And so, that is a little bit different, right? But like I've said, most of those O days, even if you were initially exploited, when we responded to it quickly, the overall impact to your organization was pretty minimal. And so that's the key with those. But most of our more impactful incidents that we work have been a result of a rather simple or trivial exploit or ingress point into the environment. This one, again, is no different. All the reports at this point that I've read say that they believe the U.S. pipeline incident occurred from a phishing email. And I've also seen reports of use of RDP. Those are things we've talked about a bazillion times here, right? We work at a lot of cases. That initial ingress point is one of those two things, or VPN, right? And improperly secured VPN. So those are really critical. Train your users on how to identify phish. Make sure that your users are comfortable reporting that phish. And that's something else that I see a lot of, is that folks may get phished, know they get phished, and they don't tell anybody about it because they're afraid of retribution. And so, like, develop really an environment that encourages folks to share that information with you. So even if they are a victim, let them understand there isn't retribution. The most important thing is that you share that information with folks so that we can fix that before it becomes a big problem. So yeah, it was a phish, and that's a perfect segue into our news section, the phish report from Pinky. What you got?
Hey, yeah. So yeah, like Oscar said, this is kind of a new section for us. Kind of want to just talk a little bit about what's going on out there. Like, what are some of the newer tactics we're seeing? Because, phishing's phishing, but at the same time, and I'll steal, I think, from a blog post that Oscar just did about, you got to know what the fish are biting, at the time, right? So if you actually going fishing, you got to present, you can't throw one kind of bug out if it's not the season for that and they're not eating that kind of thing, right? So you got to know what kind of bait for your target. And so with that, we kind of want to provide, like, here's what's sort of hot right now and what we're seeing, and some sort of new tactics. And it is super important because there's so much. I mean, like you said, almost everything we work comes in some simple mechanism like this. And I do, like somebody in the chat there mentioned, that end users love links, and that goes along really well with what we're going to talk about here today. And this one in particular, it's a little bit of a, we've talked about it a little bit before, but it's kind of a variant on that. And I may or may not get to the screenshot because I know we're getting a little short on time here. But essentially, the way this one works, and we did see this in a recent case, so it's very, very recent. We've seen this very up to date. So the way this one was presented, it's that an email was sent to a user stating that copyrighted images were in use on the organization's website, and hey, can you please look at these images to let us, to see that these are my images, I own them, and I need you to take them down. And so what they did was they included a Google Photos link in there. I'm trying to get this to share now because I actually do have the screenshot pulled up from it, redacted heavily, of course, but what we can do here. So I'll share this here for anybody that's actually on the web view. So you can see here, it came from just a Yahoo address. I'm a professional photographer. These are my images. I did want to highlight this one part here because I thought it was great. It is against the law to use stolen images, and it's so mean. It's important to, not be mean, and we want to call that out. So I did go ahead and highlight that. But you'll see down here at the bottom, essentially, download it right now and check this out for yourself. So here's a link. So a lot of times, and a lot here recently, we're not seeing the actual attachment come through the email. We're not seeing, a zip file or an exe or something like that, because people have wisened up to that. Don't open files that you're not expecting, kind of thing. We talk about it all the time. So this was a link off to a Google site. This one in particular had a sort of a zip file along with it that went along with it, but the important part is that it didn't really have to. It included a PNG that had some packed code, sort of along the lines of steganography, if you're familiar with that. So hidden stuff in an image. And this one in particular was a malware variant called Iced ID. It's a banking Trojan, which they kind of all are, but essentially it's, a way in to establish that initial foothold. And the important thing here is, we're seeing a lot more of these type of phishing attacks where it's an email, but it's a link off to somewhere else, to Google or OneDrive or, Dropbox, something like that.
Like a trusted source, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a trusted source, so it's going to make it through your Momcast. It's going to make it through your Proofpoint. All your email filtering is just going to go, oh, that's Google, that's Microsoft, let it through. And so where the danger comes in is your user clicks that, because users love links, as was pointed out there, right? So you're going to click that, and we kind of, we don't talk about that a lot because it's, yeah, you shouldn't click a link you don't know about, but we often tend to focus on, don't download the exe or the PDF on the other side. Nobody really talks about images all that much. So it's a pretty effective method from what we've seen here. And I kind of made a note about this when I was thinking through the attack pattern. This one in particular would be really effective against your web developers, your marketing folks, that kind of thing, because they're going to go, oh no, what did we pull off of, Photo Bucket or something like that was copyrighted. And so in this one, they pulled that down, loaded up that PNG that came with the packed code. It was an initial vector in, and then like Eric mentioned earlier, right, the attacker is always going to, okay, I'm in now, how do I get back in later? And so it was, spread the malware, deploy an additional command and control framework, and come back in later on this particular attack.
I think on that one, Pink, correct me too. That initial PNG actually had command and control capabilities embedded into the primary exploit, right?
It did, yeah, exactly. And I think that was the IST-ID Trojan. I can't remember if it was that or if it actually went out and pulled that down, and that's how it worked. I don't have the error analysis in front of me on it, but essentially, yeah, there was command and control right there. So just add, like I said, just layered re-access essentially. And so I put a spot in here to kind of, what else can we do, right? Because let's think about it. We always want to do general phishing training, that kind of thing. Obviously, talk to your users about that. I did want to make a note too, because it's something else we're seeing lately is trusted source, like Oscar said. A neat tactic that we see is somebody will attack and compromise a mailbox for someone in the organization, someone trusted in the organization, a C-suite or something like that, then use that email to fire off to somebody else in the organization. Said, hey, go look at this. We found these copyrighted images. Go check them out, right? You're not going to think about that. If Oscar sends me an email like that, I'm unlikely to, distrust it. Maybe if it was Eric, I might not trust it as much, but Oscar, I'm good. So no. But yeah, so be careful about that too, right? If you're not expecting files, you're not expecting this, and even if you get it unexpected, just pick up the phone and call them, or send them a chat message, say, hey, or whatever you need to do, verify that it came from them first. And if it didn't, then you've got a problem. But then from a technical perspective too, I mean, given most of our things we talk about here are people issues, but from a technical perspective too, block these external sharing sites. If you don't need them, you don't use them in your organization, shut those down. Just kill Dropbox and Google Cloud or whatever you need to do if you're not using those, because that's going to lessen that chance a lot more. So, but yeah, that's
and there are more
yeah,
secure mechanisms for sharing files, right? And that's something you should investigate. If you do need to share files within your business or with outside entities, look at some secure communication options for doing that.
Absolutely.
Yes. One of the things we've been doing, kind of taken from some of the stuff you've seen, is that we just have another Office 365 account set up, and we put files in it, and then have anyone with the link can view it. And then you literally just click on the share button inside there, put in someone's email address, and have Microsoft send the share email. So the email comes from Microsoft. It's got a Microsoft link in it. It's making it through. You know what I mean? And then you click it. If you don't pay enough attention, you just see that it's on a share in Microsoft. It legitimately is, all of that stuff's there. And so it makes it through all the filters. It's not too hard to do. It actually is more simple than setting up an actual phishing server, And so,
Yeah, I think it may be good too to just, it's kind of trivial for us, but just to make sure everybody understands like what you do when you find this in your environment too, right? Just a couple of steps, right? Like we talked about before, hopefully you've developed an environment that curates security and your folks know they're going to tell you about it. But either way, so you find out about this email, like chances are that's the only person obviously in your organization that's got that. So make sure you do, an enterprise-wide mailbox search for that message. With similar characteristics. If you have that link, look for that link specifically, look for links of similar format and try to hunt within your enterprise environment to identify those. Obviously, at that point, you want to hopefully you have logging enabled to the point so you can determine quickly who actually read those emails, right? List and identify the folks that viewed those emails and read those emails, then probably do a little bit of manual investigation and maybe just some interviewing with those folks to determine, hey, you read this email, did you click the link? Okay, if you did, we need to investigate a little bit more to determine if you have been compromised. Purge those emails from your environment immediately, so they're not sitting in users' inboxes for when they get back from vacation and they click those links later and you got to start all over again. And then, like Pinky said, look at that link, and if it is a trusted source that you're not using in your environment, block it. You don't have to. If you're not using Google Docs, there's no reason why your enterprise should permit your users to access Google Docs. Not only in this case of a phish too, but work other cases where, you know, you think about possible data exfiltration, right? And that's an easy mechanism for folks who may be disgruntled to through those other cloud sharing devices that are trusted sources. So, you know, theory of least privilege, lock those things if you don't need them, and secure your environment.
I think another thing too, you know, you talked about, you know, obviously training people to bring these things to attention, right? The other thing is to make sure that like it's really easy for them to do it, right?
Yeah.
Either like it's just extremely easy, whatever you might be using something to report within the client, whatever it is, and then that people don't feel like it's going to be a burden on someone, some department, something to look at these things. They don't, because I've had that experience with in prior jobs as a sysadmin and other situations, you know, where people were like, well, I didn't want to waste your time on it. I didn't want to be the squeaky wheel, the boy who cried wolf type of thing, right? Who's always flagging emails and then it's just annoying or it's just wasting time. Ensure people that is not ever going to be the case. Maybe even incentivize, like, hey, this person brought 53 emails to our attention this month that we thought could have been malicious, and maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but they're trying, they're showing due diligence and making sure that things are valid, you know. So.
Yeah, on the incentivization, I mean, I don't know who I stole this from, and I apologize, but I've been using this one for a couple of years now. Is mini chocolate bars, just the tiny little, you know, Hershey's bars or whatever. If somebody reports a suspicious email, go give them a tiny token of some sort, just to say, hey, good job, because it's gonna, you know, it's cheap, it's cheaper than a breach, you know. So be a little
just anything you do to curate that culture, right? You want folks to feel comfortable. I think that's it, guys. 4 o'clock. We've reached the end of our journey together this month. Also, we'll send out notes to everyone with some links, all that fun stuff. We got another blog post up this week. Pink talked a little bit about it. We'll share that link, give it a read. And we've opened up a mailbox too to accept questions. We are looking at how to interact with you guys, the audience, a little bit more. So if you get time, you think of something, just shoot us a question so we can consider that for review on the next show. And hope you guys all have a great weekend. Stay safe.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. See you guys.
Bye.